Hello, my name's Connor. I am a member of the Epicness game design team. This is our tower defense game called Candy Defense. I am the programmer, so we're going to go over the blueprints. This might take a little while because there is quite a bit implemented, so I apologize in advance if it is a little long. I will try to go quickly but still be thorough. So first and foremost, let's take a look at the actual tower blueprints. So the main tower blueprint here is pretty simple. It utilizes a lot of simple functionality. So the idea I used with the towers is it shoots the actual targets once it overlaps with their collision box. So the towers themselves have dynamically allocated uh, collision boxes judging by which tower they are. I did this using data tables, so you can easily add more towers and just basically change their functionality. So looking at a few of these functions, you can kind of see from the comments exactly what they do. So this one right here, this is how they're allocating the actual range of it, judging by the size of the collision box in the mesh itself. This one right here checks if the tower needs a new target or to continue shooting the active target. And this is the actual function that shoots the projectile from the tower itself. So it spawns the actual projectile blueprint or projectile actor and then shoots it towards the target of the tower. So what else we have? This function right here is pretty important. It records all the potential targets in the actual tower's collision radius. In case it kills a target, then it knows, hey, I can still shoot one of these other targets. It utilizes this using an array of hit results here. Kind of see how it works. So that's the tower blueprint. Next up, we will look at the projectile blueprint. So the projectile blueprint has basically a pretty simple function and then a little bit more of a complicated function. So this one, it basically just applies the damage to the target when the projectile reaches it and then destroys the projectile. So it makes sense, you shoot a bullet at somebody, the bullet's not going to be floating there. And this one right here is basically, I had an issue where when I was firing a projectile at a target, if it killed the target while another projectile was on the way, that other projectile would just be floating aimlessly and nothing would happen to it. So basically, I used a last known location variable to basically keep track of the last known location if that issue happened. So this function solved that problem for me. But yeah, that's the projectile. So now let's look at the placement tower blueprint. So basically, this is a blueprint that um, acts as kind of the visualization for the player when they are trying to place a tower. So the idea is basically like, when they're in a tower defense game, if you select a tower you want to build, when you're dragging your mouse around trying to place it, it kind of shows a little outline of the tower. It shows you if it's a valid area or not before you actually click and put the tower into the world. So that's what this kind of handles. So this one, it places the tower in the location, shows by the player if it's valid. It's pretty straightforward. And then this one handles basically it checks if it's a valid location, and then it also implements a small snap grid system. And as of right now, the only area that I have that a player cannot place a tower is on top of another tower. I still need to implement it being invalid if it's placed in the actual lane that the zombies are running through. So this is still a work in progress, but the preliminary setup's there. So that is I call it kind of like the placement tower blueprint. So next up, here I'll just show the tower data table real quick and kind of see what I meant by you can easily add more towers if you need to, judging by just by adding a new row to this data table in the struct. Pretty simple stuff and very, very helpful if you want to add more implementation. More, different towers and whatnot. So next, let's take a look at the AI. So the spawner is where the majority of the functionality happens. So because when you're talking about a tower defense, basically you have waves of AI spawning. So basically, some of this is just the actual creates the buttons in the UI, updates the buttons in the UI for the next wave, and so on and so forth. But first, let's take a look at the actual function itself. So similar to the towers, I utilized a data table and a struct to represent each individual wave. So the first column in the data table would be the first wave of zombies. That way you can actually pull out information from the zombies and set them depending on the wave for what you're looking for. So you can kind of see what's going on here. It's basically what's happening. It just sets the next wave. It updates the wave. It keeps track of which wave it's on. And then judging by if the wave is currently active or not, it will either show or not show the spawn next wave button, because obviously you don't want people spawning the next wave while they're still in the middle of a wave. So that's kind of what's happening here. So in the actual zombie AI itself, It only has this one function, which basically keeps track of the zombie's health, and then it destroys the zombie from the array of zombies in the level if its health reaches 0. Or what I have not implemented yet is what happens when the zombie reaches the end of the level, but I will take care of that later on. So that's pretty much the zombie, I believe. We can just take a look at the data table once more so you can kind of see it's got which wave number it is, how much health the zombies will have on that wave, the speed of that zombies on the wave, and the number of actual zombies that are spawned in the wave. And the spawn delay itself as well as the mesh of the zombie. So, for like say wave 2, I have higher health, lower speed, less enemies, and the delay between their spawn is higher. So like I said, similar to the towers, if you want to, like when you want to add a new wave, it's super simple to just plug in values for here. The blueprint handles all of that information. Um, so yeah, it's super handy. So next, let's take a look at the player blueprint. So the player blueprint for a tower defense, I basically just use a top-down camera as the player. Um, so basically, the only real functionality for the player itself is being able to click the buttons and then use what happens when you click those buttons. So like placing towers, spawning the wave, and then being able to control the camera. So these two down here are basically the ones, the functions that allow the player to interact with the buttons in the UI that are displayed. And then these two functions have to do with the actual camera the player is controlling. So I use a mouse cursor implementation for camera control. So this complicated one right here, this big spaghetti code function basically handles panning the camera. So basically what it does is when the player puts their cursor in like the top 10, bottom 10, left and right 10% of the screen, it'll pan the camera that direction. Um, but yeah, it's pretty simple as far as explaining it. Just the actual code is a little bit of a nightmare because of all of the vector locations and whatnot. Um, and then this function right here basically sets the limit for how far the player can pan. So it'll force the player to stop when they get to a certain point. Yeah, so that's pretty much the camera. It's actually was a lot more simple than I was expecting. The panning was a little bit of a nightmare as far as organizational, but it's okay because it totally works. And it actually helped me with a lot of other like distance-oriented implementations for other functions in other blueprints. So other than that, let's look at the UI real quick. So pretty simple UI buttons. Spawn wave button right here. Basically, it calls the spawner functionalities that we had in the uh, the zombie spawner blueprint, and just basically links that to the actual button itself. Similarly, we have the tower selection. Um, so once again, by using the data table, I can easily just say, okay, if they click the chair, if I want to add a new tower, I just make a button for it, link the button to this, set it, so it references the row name of that tower, and then the functionality is implemented. It's honestly super simple that way. So yeah, you can kind of see it's just basically setting all the necessary information for the widget um, to spawn whatever tower they choose. So I believe that sums up all the blueprints. So we can take a quick look at how the functionality for these blueprints actually work in the level. I just want to double check that is everything. I believe that is everything. Okay. So let's hit play. You can see when I hit play, it immediately brings us to that top-down camera. The panning system works. And I'll just show you real quick that when I hit an edge, it'll stop. It does work for all 4 directions, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to show that. If I hit the button Q, that's what I have linked to the actual tower creation buttons. So right now, I have the bush tower and the chair tower. It's basically just holder meshes until we actually implement more complex tower meshes. So you can kind of see it's green right now because I can place that in the level. That's the placement tower blueprint I was talking about. If I highlight it over the bush, I can't actually build it. Same thing. Can't build it over the chair. And that is you can kind of see the snap grid system that I have in place for that reason. Like I said, I still need to make it so I can't build the tower in the lane, but that is something I'll implement later on. So that's basically how it works. Just hit Q and you can toggle the menu over and over. So let's spawn our first wave. The zombies will spawn up in this direction, and you can see they're moving. They get in the range of the towers start shooting at them. One zombie dies, it updates the location for the towers to shoot at a new one. And you can see they're trying to make it to the end location over here. Same idea, updates the spawn button, spawn wave 2. Same thing will happen. This is the slower zombies I was talking about that are a little bit bulkier. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the basic gameplay. Things I still need to implement would be the currency system for actually building the towers, because right now the player can just build however many towers they want. So that's one thing I need to do. And then the last thing I believe I need to do as far as the core fundamentals of the game is then if the zombies reach the end of the level without being killed, it would then take away from like the player's health pool or lives. I think we are doing candy. The zombies are stealing candy, hence candy defense. But yeah, that is the game from the programmer's perspective. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks a lot.